What's up, all? It's Shay Sayss, and welcome back. We've all probably taken a personality test before, either in school or just for fun. Here to give us a new way to look at personality tests is writer and researcher Stephen Zhou. Welcome, Stephen. How are you?
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Great. So I want to talk about personality tests. Do you think they're outdated? Because I've taken them years ago. They're still kind of happening. What do you think?
Yeah, personality is one of those kind of an enigma, right? Because we all know it exists, and we know that there are meaningful differences between people in terms of how they behave or how they think. But it's hard to measure, right? And personality tests, there's so many of them out there, and yeah, they're a little fun to take. And I made a point in the article that, yeah, sometimes it could be useful as a self-reflection tool. But speaking from the perspective of a PhD researcher, I researched how we measure personality in my studies, and it's actually very, very complicated. That simple on a scale of 1 to 5 scale that you see often out in on when you Google a personality test, it's not really that accurate.
So, do you think people have a distinct personality, or does it change on a day to day basis, maybe by experience of like who they meet?
Sure, there's 2 points there. The first is personality is not something that we can put people into a box. It's a very complicated interplay of thoughts, emotions, behavior. And so it's best thought of on a scale, actually. So rather than saying you are an introvert, you only like being alone, and you are an extrovert, you only like being with people, there's some sort of in between there that people tend to be towards. But the second point that you mentioned is yes, personality, or at least the expression of personality, can differ throughout the day depending on the situation. You might act more extroverted if you're on camera doing a TV show compared to if you're sitting at home reading a book, you might act a lot less extroverted.
And I just wanted to know the terminology as well. I know there's an in
Sure.
between of the introvert and extrovert. What is that terminology again? The term that people use?
The term for in between or the term introvert versus extrovert?
Well, the term introvert versus extrovert, if you want to explain that, of course. But
Yeah.
I know a lot of people always say, like, oh, I am a little bit introverted and a little bit extroverted. Is there a term for the in between one?
Some people use the term ambivert. I have heard
Okay.
that discussed before. It isn't something that necessarily we use in the scientific research as much, since we refer to people on a percentile scale, meaning if you take a more validated personality test, you might say it might say something like you tend to be more introverted, as in you tend to prefer being alone than maybe 70% of the rest of the population. So we use a scale term rather than saying you are an introvert versus you are an extrovert.
Gotcha. So, what are your thoughts on the psychological effect of personality tests? Could it be damaging to sort people into boxes, since I know that you mentioned that it is not to put people in boxes?
Yeah, I've seen it go both ways actually. On the
Okay.
positive side, it's sometimes helpful to take a personality test, even a free one that you find online, and find out, yeah, you know what, I do tend to prefer being alone. And you could take that positively. I took it positively. I do prefer being alone, and as a result of that, I realized, you know what, I like sitting at home reading a book and writing a paper and things like that. So it could certainly be taken in a positive light, but it could also be taken negatively. And that's where the downsides of putting people into a box come to play, because the fact is you're not going to be always preferred you don't always prefer being alone. There are times, there are situations where you do great in front of a crowd. But if you have this mental image of I am an introvert, I can't be in front of crowds, that could be a block preventing you from doing really extraordinary things in front of a group of people. So there are some negative effects of trying to place people into strict blocks.
So, why do you think that personality tests are so popular these days?
I think it comes down to it's fun and we know it exists. At the
Okay.
end of the day, I'm not denying personality is important. It's very important. And in our research, we know it does predict important outcomes, such as work experience, such as even some general psychological health outcomes. So it's very important. And we know it exists. We know there are differences between people. So it's fun to say, okay, I can take a test and figure out what's the difference between me and my partner or me and my coworker and be able to understand that. So I think that's what drives this desire to learn more about personality tests. My big caution is just take it with a grain of salt. These free tests that you find online, they're not going to be very accurate. They may be helpful in terms of self reflection, but they're not going to be very accurate. So be very careful not to let that box you into something.
Thank you, Stephen. That's definitely a message I have to take personally as well, to take it with a grain of salt. I definitely enjoyed this interview, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, and thank you all for watching. Please follow Bold TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Have a great day.